Hi, my name is Michał Grela, and I would like to welcome you very warmly to yet another episode of our IT Leadership Insights by Future Processing. Today we're going to talk about legacy systems in the insurance sector. A lot of software is obsolete, and heritage systems are causing more and more trouble for global businesses nowadays, especially in industries such as finance or insurance. A lot of core applications are still the ones that have been written in COBOL 30 or 40 years ago, and that's a problem. Nevertheless, it turns out that often this migration into new systems is not that straightforward. Today my guest is Jay Antonio, founder and CEO of TJ Cube Technologies, and an experienced enterprise architect working with global insurance players. Very glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Could you tell us something more about yourself, please?
Okay, yeah. So I started my career in Asia, in the Philippines, with a global insurer. Started as a junior developer. Actually, before that, I started with a bank for a couple of years, and then moved to insurance as an engineer, and worked my way up as an architect, looking after Southeast Asian countries. And then my career moved me over to the UK, where I looked after UK operations, and now in Ireland, where I look after EMEA. And just last year, like what you said, started my company, my own venture, and it's with my bread and butter, it's insurance technology. So here we are. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for this introduction, and let's dive deep into the topic. And I found an interesting quote that I'd like to start with.
Okay.
And it says that legacy systems are fine as long as insurers are serving legacy customers with legacy products, with legacy processes through legacy channels. How do you relate to that?
That's very true. I mean, before we kind of bash legacy and the whole insurance sector, we need to, I think, bear in mind that the industry's been there for so many years,
yes,
right? And a lot of them almost reaching 100 years. And if you look at the landscape of any insurer, you will see, like what you said, you will see COBOL, you will see client server applications,
yep,
you will see software as a service, you'll see SOA, you'll see OOP, everything. It's like every piece of technology evolution you'll see in the landscape,
yep,
which means the industry and an insurance company has been innovating and evolving and disrupting themselves before we were even born. So if you look at it, they've been doing this so many times already. And that quote is so true because those softwares that was built like many years ago was built for the sole purpose of the business vision back then, which is not applicable now because it changes, right? Your customer expectation changes, your business model changes, the value proposition changes all the time. But software is not able to cope up. Although it tried to cope up, it's not able to cope up that quickly, So if you look at legacy systems right now, of course it will mismatch with the business value that you want to achieve.
That's what you say is definitely true, and the systems have been there with us for years. But software budgets today are bigger than ever before.
Yes.
Yet a vast majority of that spend is still dedicated into just keeping the lights on,
right, yes,
maintaining the status quo, applications that run the business, and that's a lot of money that's not going into sort of further developing or
right,
enhancement.
Right.
So what's causing the issue with the legacy? Why is that? Sort of.
Well, I think there's a number of factors there, and it's a complicated beast to I think to maneuver, right? So a lot of these legacy systems are actually very monolithic, very big. It's not.
Banks and insurers are monolithic and big.
Right. Banks are. I mean, the enterprise is big, the business is big, but the softwares that supports them are huge as well, right? Are monolithic as well, and back then they weren't really designed and built to change, right? They're not componentized. Like if you look at the software practices that you see right now, it's like microservices, it's components, it's like easy moving pieces, small, agile, and everything, all that good stuff, right? The softwares back then weren't really designed to be that way, right? So you build softwares back then, it's big, and there's always a mindset of this should last me forever.
Yeah.
I don't want to take care of it.
If I invest, I invest for good. Yeah.
Yes, if I invest, I want to invest in others. Big thing, and guess what? It's catching up to us. Wherein we are now paying the price of that, right? So that's why we pay for lights on, and it's difficult to replace that because guess what? It's a big system. So say for example, a big policy admin system, you would have like rating, underwriting, you would have a lot of stuff, right? All convoluted into one system. It's kind of difficult to say, okay, let me replace that simple piece of component. It's difficult to break that apart and replace it with another component. So now we're kind of paying the price. That's why it's quite understandable that a lot of money goes into lights on. But there's always a way on how you can transition out of that, right? It's tricky, but and it depends on the company and it depends on their situation on how you want to move away from that.
I really like this comparison of a tanker versus a jet ski,
right?
Meaning the huge obsolete heritage system versus modern nimble,
correct.
nimble solutions, and that's definitely causing heavy dependency, and a lot of insurance executives are definitely recognizing that they are, well, to some extent lacking behind, just to call things straight. But what are the biggest problems with legacy software? The biggest
I think my opinion and based on my experience and what I've seen and what I've dealt with, my biggest problem is again the big systems. It's difficult to break it apart, and it's difficult to change them, to enhance them, right? So they're not able to cope. So that's one. So it's difficult to break them apart. And second is given that they're difficult to change, people and operations do a lot of workarounds.
Yeah.
Around
so
the
not
systems.
Very effective.
Not very effective.
Yeah.
They compromise on data. They treat data differently to what it's meant for. They use certain, really detailed example is they use certain fields to capture information because they couldn't, it's difficult to add in, an additional field there. So, which means that your data is a bit screwed up. Right, and given that there's a lot of bugs, so data is not of good quality and not available, right? So so I think that's one big problem. It's difficult to break it apart. And second is a lot of the innovation that I see is forced to run in silo. So it's difficult to merge them and integrate them with the legacy core that you have, right? So eventually, these new and shiny systems becomes legacy as well, and they rot because they're running in silo. They can really feed data.
That's a wasted opportunity.
Exactly, right? So I think if you are maneuvering out of that situation, you, I think, need to really plan out and think, okay, what's my vision? For the future, what's my business vision is, and always paired with your IT vision.
I can really relate to what you said about there's this people factor with legacy software involved as well. And as you said, since they were built plenty of years ago, there's not many people that can that know how to deal with them, how to maintain that, how to develop that. That's the first thing. Another thing is that it definitely backfires because you have to invest a lot of time and effort in training new employees, and it definitely affects the company perception.
Yes.
Because you can't just compare yourself or build any proper competitive advantage if you struggle with a 40-year-old system,
right,
versus a young company that's been using the whole innovative stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, is even in resourcing and hiring, it's like I'm a fresh grad, I'm a really clever IT guy or business guy.
Reality. That's
right.
And
then do I go with this company and maintain old software, or do I go with a new company and use new technology and stuff? So you'll always go with the shiniest and brightest thing.
That's it.
So that's another challenge.
You've mentioned data. One thing is to use the opportunity and walk this avenue it opens, but the other thing is the security. And from what I've seen, the old heritage systems increase the risk of breaches, and vulnerabilities are not that easy to address.
Right, right. Yeah, of course, because same with your business vision, your security issues and your threats change, right? There are new threats right now that we didn't have before. And now that we have a lot of data, we have a lot of information, the risk just becomes bigger and bigger and changes so rapidly. So these old systems are not able to cope up with those threats and security. So what's happening is, you just lock them up and say, I hope no one, no one penetrates this. And one joke that I had before, it's like, it's okay to penetrate that data because I couldn't understand it anyway. So even if someone breaks into that, good luck. If you're able to understand it, talk to me. we can do something about the information. And talking about data again, it's like data is becoming so unavailable and unreliable to the point that insurers would have a wealth of information that they cannot really capitalize and utilize. There's a lot of information. I mean, if you look at it, right? So insurance is one of the industries wherein we give all information, no questions asked.
Yeah.
What's our health records? What's this? What's that? We just give it to them. Okay, so that
you
I can.
have to.
Right, you have to. Right, so that I can get my life insured or my car insured. We give everything to them, right? But despite all of that information, it's kind of difficult to harness that if it's unreliable and unavailable, right? If it's just stuck in one system, and you cannot push it to your data warehouse easily, or you cannot push it to another system to do something about it. So that's a challenge as well. And what I'm seeing as well, it's a lot of the data are becoming proprietary, meaning I've got a platform, right? I've got a policy admin or a claims platform, and the data that's held within that platform is proprietary to the vendor.
Yeah.
So if you look at it, a lot of applications in the industry are very application-centric, not data-centric. So let me just explain that a little bit, meaning we dictate our solutions based on the features of the application of what we want to do, right? I think it needs to be more data-centric, wherein we understand the data that we need, we understand how we wield the data, how we use the data, and then we build applications around that. Okay, so the data becomes the center of your ecosystem, and your application is like surrounding that, managing that, looking after that, and then doing something about it, whether it's analytics, whether it's processing, whether it's communicating with your customers. But at the center of that will be your information, right? So that is the data centricity part of the world, wherein data is your asset. As an insurer, I own the data, and the applications are just serving that data for me.
The other way around.
Exactly, the other way around. So having this type of architecture allows you to easily recycle your applications quicker, because one problem that that we can look at is the reason why it's difficult to get away of these legacy systems is because if I get rid of the legacy system, I'm getting rid of my data as well, because data is stuck there, right? So I need to do either a data migration to move it to another system, or
which is a hassle.
Which is a hassle, right? So if I even upgrading, one platform to another, right? So the higher version of the platform might not recognize that data structure properly. So in order for you to upgrade, the upgrading part is easy. But the data migration part is the difficult part, because you have to understand the nuances and complexities of this data and the problem it has, bearing in mind that this system probably ran for the last 20 years.
Yes.
So there's a lot of patching, there's a lot of quality issues that you need to understand to bring it to that level.
Definitely. This migration is a hassle, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But were we to sum up this part of the conversation, there's this. We have to agree, and we're at the same page, that definitely legacy has a lot of a lot of disadvantages are just wasting the opportunity and are just not effective. And if that does not tell enough, then I've found that U.S. federal government spent on IT in 80% is dedicated to just maintenance, and only in 22. To modernization. So that's a lot of that's a huge cost factor.
Yeah, and it's I think a lot of I didn't see that numbers, but I would say a lot of companies would be like that.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like we also need to look at the reality is we have legacy systems, right? And the reality is when we move to the new stage or evolution of technology, we cannot get rid of legacy systems right away. So we need to plan our transition wherein new and legacy works together.
That was what I was about to ask you, because you've already mentioned that there are several approaches and that there are challenges and obstacles on the way. And I was about to ask you whether it is better to go for an evolution or rather a revolution.
Well, it depends on how you define evolution versus revolution.
So how would you approach?
I would look at it as again data centricity versus application centricity. I would go with data centricity. It's like prioritize your data, okay, not your application. So that's one, architecture-wise, and then IT vision. And this is like our motto in my in the old company that I work with. It's like IT vision should always be your business vision, meaning they should always go hand in hand. So your IT team needs to understand what the business team needs, and the business team needs to understand what the IT team's going through, and work together so that you can achieve that.
Brilliant, yeah.
Right. So third is ecosystem versus systems, meaning we need to find a way on how, instead of us building big systems all the time, look at how do I build small solutions, right?
Yeah.
And incorporate it in the whole ecosystem, right? Environment. Because sometimes we stop at, okay, I built an application, I'm done. Move on to the next one. It's never done, right? It's like sitting there, it's doing probably 1 or 2 integrations, right, and then you build another system, and then you do this. Before you know it, you have like many systems with a web matrix of integrations that you cannot even manage and maintain. And you lose data centricity because each one of them holds the same set of information, very redundant, and you don't know which is what. So I think we need to start looking at data centricity. We need to start looking at ecosystems, and obviously the business and IT vision together. And I think if we start defining our roadmap based on those principles, I think we'll have a better chance of transitioning, revolutionizing how we do things.
So speaking practically, it's about preserving and protecting the old system, and at the same time building something new around it, and
right. Well, it's more of I have my legacy asset, right? I have my legacy asset, and then break it down into, okay, what is my legacy asset good for? Right? What is my legacy asset good for? And what is
just assess the current state.
Assess your asset.
So that
I
would
think
stage one.
Right, stage one. Assess your asset. What do I have there, and what's working nice, what's not working nice, right? And if
where am I at this?
Right, yeah. Where am I? So for example, if this big table is serving its purpose, I'll keep this. If it's not, then I'll get rid of it. But it's not that simple, because this big table could have like 5 different things, right?
Yeah.
And it's like identifying, okay, which one of the 5 is good. Keep that, and then find a way on how that can work well with other newer systems. Okay.
So prepare a scenario of what's possible.
What's possible? It's like catalog first. What do I have? What do I need? What's my vision? And then how do I approach that, right? And then it's like figuring out how can all of this interoperate properly, right?
That's important, because what we also have to say is that there is some level of disruption that the enterprise just won't cope with.
Right.
You can't just say, I'm doing everything from scratch
starting
tomorrow.
Yeah. I think if you're a new company and you don't have anything there, then yes, it's greenfield. You can do whatever, right? But you're again, it's like you're converting a tanker to several jet skis, right?
Yeah.
But it's like if you have independent components and then they're not working well together, that's gonna that's gonna be bad for you as well, right?
Okay.
So you want them, even though they're individual pieces, very agile and very everything, it's moving one direction, right? It's serving a purpose, right? And that is the whole ecosystem approach, right? So so it's not a tanker. It's going back to your analogy. It's a multitude of jet skis, each one having their role and doing whatever a tanker needs to do. To serve a purpose and serve your business.
I really like what you said about being data centric. What I would also add is to being security centric from day one. Because with data security, it's not like you can think about it when the project is done. You have to think about it from the very
exactly.
beginning.
I mean, the way I see security, that's why I'm not touching on it a lot. The way I look at security, regulations, and everything, it's just part of your requirement. It's just part of your, what do I need to do to deliver this software, right? It's like, how do I secure data? How do I secure the software? What are the regulations around this? It's just part of understanding the business and part of understanding your requirements in building this, right? So I think it goes without saying that you always need to put that in place.
Well, that was very, very informative, and I was thinking about trying to wrap it up. Legacy is definitely not an excuse, and unlikely, another comparison I found is that I really like that one, is that unlike wine and friends, software is not getting better with age, unfortunately.
yes.
But the limitations of a heritage system definitely outgrow the usefulness. Because let's agree, to some extent, it's still useful to operate on that legacy systems. But if you want to be a leader, you have to lead, not follow. And customers, especially young customers in insurance industry, now expect more. Than
well,
old
yeah, I
thing.
mean, they're expecting the same experience they're getting from other industries. It's like retail and even banking. If they can do that, why can't my insurer do this? So the expectation of customers are changing rapidly, and we just need to adopt on that and chase on that.
So modernizing and replacing should be a top priority, but it has to be done right.
Yes, good roadmap, and it's different per company. It's different on and you just need to look at the company, and then you just need to look at what's the best way to move forward. Just accepting the fact that legacy software in some shape or form will always be with us. So we just need to make sure that it can work well with the new target architecture that we're visioning to support your business.
And that's a good summary. Thank you.
you so
That was
much.
very, very insightful. And thank you, our viewers, for watching this another episode of IT Leadership Insights by Future Processing. If you liked it and you found it useful, please don't hesitate to like it and share it on social media. And please do drop us a line if you would like to have a topic covered in one of the other episodes of IT Leadership Insights. Thank you very much.
Like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.